She walked into the courtroom, ready to fight for her son's life. But when the judge stepped in, she stopped breathing. He wasn't just a man in a robe. He was the billionaire who vanished from her life 9 years ago. The man who never knew he was a father. Now he was the one deciding if she'd lose her child forever. Welcome to Hearts and Billions. To get a shout out from us, kindly give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel and tell us where you are watching from in the comment section. The envelope was thin, but it felt heavier than anything Isla Rivera had ever held. She stood at the edge of her kitchen. Counter crumbs from her son's half-eaten toast still on the plate, staring at her name printed in bold letters. Notice of custody hearing. Her breath caught. She tore it open with trembling fingers. Words blurred in and out of focus, but 5 of them burned into her chest like fire. Petitioner, the Rowe family estate. She dropped into the nearest chair, heart pounding. Her fingers tightened around the letter. They had found her. It had been 9 years since she'd walked away from that world. 9 years since she left behind the mansions, the lies, the heartbreak, and Elliot. But now they wanted her son. The world she escaped. Back then, she was a college scholarship girl. He was the golden boy of the Rowe dynasty, son of billionaires, heir to a legal empire. Their love had been real, raw, impossible, until his parents found out. They offered her money to leave. She refused, so they took something worse, Elliot himself. They threatened his future, his schooling, his position on the bench. And just like that, he was gone. Isla left before they could destroy what little she had left. Pregnant, heartbroken, alone. Now they want Leo. She glanced at the small backpack by the door. Leo's. Her son. Her world. Her reason for everything. He was 8 now, curious, bright, always asking why the rich lived behind gates while they walked to school. She had kept his paternity a secret, not out of shame but out of fear. But now they were coming. With lawyers, with power, with blood ties and billion-dollar names. She stands up. Isla folded the letter and stood. She didn't have money. She didn't have connections. But she had the truth. And she would not lose her son. Not to the family who tried to erase her. Not to the man who broke her heart. And definitely not to a courtroom built on names and wealth. She just didn't know yet that the judge waiting for her case was the very man she thought she'd never see again. There was a time Isla believed in fairy tales, not the ones with tiaras and castles, just the simple kind, where love was enough. And for a brief, perfect moment in her life, it was. When they met, she had met Elliot Rowe in her 3rd year of college. She was a scholarship student, quiet, focused, working nights at the library to pay rent. He was the rising star in law school, a charismatic, brilliant, the son of the powerful Rowe family empire. They shouldn't have crossed paths, but they did. He asked her for help with a research paper. She rolled her eyes and called him arrogant. He brought her coffee the next morning and asked for a second chance. And just like that, they became everything to each other. The months that followed, they studied late into the night, took long walks through campus, whispering dreams. He told her he wanted to be the kind of judge who actually helped people. She told him she wanted to open a school for kids like her, who grew up with nothing, but dared to dream big. He kissed her under streetlights. He promised her forever, and she believed him. The day it all crashed. It changed the night she met his parents. His mother stared at her chipped nails. His father asked if she had a last name worth remembering. 2 days later, Elliot grew distant. Then came the call. They're threatening to cut off everything, my career. Law school, even the internship offer in D.C. She waited for him to say, "But I choose you." Instead, he said, I need time. She gave him time. He never came back. The goodbye she never got. 3 weeks later, she packed her things and left school. She didn't tell him about the baby. She didn't beg. She just disappeared and built a life from scratch. Now, he was her judge. As she sat on the bus to the courthouse, Isla replayed the memories over and over. He was the love of her life, and the father of the boy she now had to fight to keep. What she didn't know was that Elliot had no idea she was coming, and when he saw her again, The hospital room was cold and too quiet. No flowers, no visitors, no excited hands waiting to hold the baby. Just Isla, 22, curled in a stiff hospital bed, holding the child. She brought into the world with nothing but quiet tears and a whisper of a name. Leo. No father, no family. Just her. She had labored alone. No one to squeeze her hand. No one pacing in the hallway. The nurse asked, "Would you like to list the father?" She hesitated, then shook her head. He's not part of this. But deep inside, she had hoped maybe, just maybe, Elliot would come. That he would feel it, sense it. He never did. She left the hospital with nothing but hope. There was no nursery waiting at home. No crib, no baby clothes beyond what a charity box could spare. But Isla wrapped Leo in a thrifted blue blanket and carried him out like the most precious thing she had ever touched. Because he was. She had nothing else. No savings, no degree, only determination. And from that day forward, every decision, every breath, every meal was for Leo. He grew up without knowing. Leo never asked about his father, at least not yet. He was 8 now, bright, gentle. He liked to sketch animals and pretend he was a superhero. Every time he smiled, Isla saw Elliot's face. But she never told Leo the truth. How could she? How do you tell a child that the man he came from never came back? But the truth was about to find them both. As Isla ironed Leo's school uniform that morning, she looked at his face and felt a wave of guilt she couldn't push away anymore. He deserved answers. And after the court hearing, he might finally get them. The courtroom smelled like old wood and tension. Isla walked in holding Leo's birth certificate, her hands trembling slightly. Her cheap heels echoed louder than they should have. Every step felt like a question. "Do you belong here?" She answered with silence and a straight back. She was scared, but she wasn't weak. She was a mother. She didn't expect him. She approached the front, ready to face her ex's legal team. But then the bailiff spoke. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Rowe." Isla turned, and the world tilted. He stepped onto the bench. Elliot, same deep eyes, same sharp jaw, but his posture was heavier now. He wore a judge's robe, carried a gavel, wore his family's power like a crown. And when their eyes met, he froze. A second of recognition. Isla's breath caught. Her hands tightened around her folder. For a second, the courtroom disappeared. All she could hear was the echo of his voice years ago. "I love you. That's never going to change." But it had. He blinked. His fingers tightened on the bench. She looked away, heart racing, mind spinning. He didn't know. He didn't know about Leo. And now, he was the one holding her future in his hands. Leo's fate had just become complicated. The courtroom silence cracked as Elliot cleared his throat. He began the hearing, professional, calm. But Isla saw the way his eyes kept flicking back to her, to the folder in her lap, to the boy's name on the papers in front of him. Leo Rivera, born 9 years ago, only a few months after Isla vanished. He did the math, and in that moment he knew the child at the center of this case might be his. The courtroom buzzed faintly, papers shuffling, lawyers whispering, a clock ticking on the wall. But Isla heard none of it. She sat still, spine straight, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Yet her heart was pounding like a war drum. Across the room, Judge Elliot Rowe sat tall on the bench, his face composed, his voice steady. But his eyes, they were chaos. A glance that lasted years. Their eyes met again, and this time it was longer. Isla tried to look away. She tried to be strong. But there was something in his expression she hadn't seen in years. Uncertainty. The man who once spoke in absolute truths was now afraid to ask. The one question she feared the most. "Is he mine?" He reads the file. Elliot lowered his gaze to the file in front of him. Leo Rivera, age 8, mother Isla Rivera. No father listed. Born just 4 months after she disappeared. His hand hesitated before flipping the next page. Suddenly, his courtroom, his entire world didn't feel so stable. The voice in his head was no longer a judge's. It was a father's. Inside Isla's mind. Across the aisle, Isla clutched her folder tighter. She could feel his stare like heat on her skin. She wasn't sure what was worse. The fear of losing the case, or the fear that the man she once loved would hate her for keeping the truth. She whispered in her mind, "Please don't hate me. Please don't take him." The tension builds. Elliot looked up again. This time, his gaze dropped just briefly to the little boy sitting quietly behind Isla. Leo, brown hair, curious eyes, and something about his posture, his calm, watchful silence, reminded Elliot of someone he used to be. It was like looking in a mirror. His heart dropped into his stomach. He clears his throat. He straightened, voice firm again. "We will begin with opening statements." He didn't flinch. But inside he wasn't judging this case. He was trying to figure out how he was suddenly part of it. The courthouse was dark now. The lawyers had packed up. The bailiff had gone home. But Judge Elliot Rowe sat alone in his chambers, still staring at the boy's file. His hand hovered over the page that listed Leo's birth date. 9 years ago. His eyes drifted to the photo, stapled to the back of the report, a school ID of the boy. Smiling softly, clean haircut, backpack on. But what hit him hardest wasn't the date. It was the smile, that crooked half-smile. He'd seen it before, in a mirror, in a photograph on his own dresser, in himself. The ghosts of what-ifs. He leaned back, covering his face with one hand. Isla. He hadn't said her name out loud in almost a decade. She had been his world once. The only woman who didn't care about his money, his last name, or the future his parents had mapped out for him. She saw him, and now she was back, standing in his courtroom, guarded, worn down, and stronger than ever. But she'd looked afraid of him. The letter he never sent. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside was a yellowed envelope, never mailed. Isla. "I'm sorry I disappeared. They took everything from me, but I should have fought for you. I should have found you." He had written it 1 month after she left, but he'd never found the courage to send it. He thought it was too late. Now he knew. It may have been too late for him, but not for the child she brought into the world. He couldn't sleep that night. Back in his penthouse, Elliot stared out at the city. The skyline he helped build, the life he'd inherited, the silence he'd chosen. For the first time in years, he didn't feel powerful. He felt powerless, because the boy might be his. And the mother? She had every reason to never let him near either of them again. But tomorrow, he was going to find out the truth, no matter how much it broke him. The second day in court began with clouds hanging low over the city. Inside, the courtroom was cold, not just from the air conditioning, but from the tension that wrapped around every seat, every bench, every breath. Udla sat on the plaintiff's side, shoulders drawn, her lawyer flipping through notes. Leo was not with her today. She couldn't bear to have him watch strangers argue over who should raise him. Across the aisle, the Rowe family's legal team filled 3 chairs, suits sharp, briefcases newer than Isla's car. And at the center of it all, Judge Elliot Rowe. He stepped into the room, face calm, but his heart was nowhere near the bench, because today he had to pretend. Pretend this was just another case. Pretend the child's name didn't haunt his thoughts. Pretend the woman sitting before him hadn't once made him believe in forever. Opening fire. The Rowe attorneys opened strong. "Your Honor, we're here to protect the long-term welfare of the child, Leo Rivera, whose mother has no legal father listed on the birth certificate, minimal income, and unstable housing history." Isla's fists clenched. They made it sound like she was a stranger to her own son. Her lawyer stood calmly. "Leo has been healthy, safe, and thriving in his mother's care since birth. The family bringing this suit has had no relationship with him, offered no support, and only now, 9 years later, seek custody." Idla stared ahead, refusing to flinch. But she felt like she was back in college again, surrounded by people who thought money gave them the right to erase her. Elliot's inner war. From the bench, Elliot listened, but his mind was splitting in two. One half was the judge, the man sworn to uphold fairness, neutrality, law. The other half was the man who once loved the woman in front of him, who now wondered if he had a son sitting at home somewhere, with eyes just like his. Her name on his lips. They called her to the witness stand. Elliot tried to steady his breath as she walked forward. When she raised her hand to take the oath, her voice trembled, but didn't break. "Do you swear to tell the truth?" "The whole truth and nothing but the truth." "I do." She sat down, eyes scanning the jury box, anywhere but at him. And when her lawyer asked her to explain why she had never sought child support, Isla's voice was quiet but firm. "Because I wasn't looking for money. I was looking for peace. I didn't want anything from the Rowe family. I just wanted to protect my son." The room fell silent. Even the walls seemed to listen, and Elliot couldn't breathe. Idla sat on the witness stand, shoulders stiff, eyes glistening. Across the courtroom, cameras flashed. A reporter in the back scribbled notes. The Rowe attorneys whispered as they passed around papers, but she heard none of it. All she heard was her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, and Elliot's voice, professional, distant, as he said, "Proceed with questioning." He didn't even look at her. That hurt more than the lawsuit. The question that shattered her. The Rowe family's lead attorney stood. "Ms. Rivera, do you believe it's healthy for a child to grow up without a father figure? Without family support? Without stability?" She inhaled sharply. The question was designed to make her feel small. She could have said yes. She could have dodged. Instead, her voice cracked as she whispered, "I believe a child should grow up with love." The attorney leaned in. "But don't you think Leo deserves more than just love? Don't you think he deserves more?" And that was it. She couldn't hold it in. Isla's hands trembled. Her lips quivered. She turned to the judge, to Elliot, the man who once knew every scar on her heart. "You think I haven't asked myself that every night?" She said louder now. The courtroom froze. "You think I don't look at my son and wonder if I've done enough? If I've given him what he deserves?" Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't stop. "I've worked 3 jobs. I've skipped meals. I've sewn his school clothes by hand. I've held him through fevers without medicine. I've missed sleep, rent, and years of peace, but I've never missed one day of loving him." Her voice broke. "So no, maybe I can't give him a mansion or a name that opens doors. But I've given him a home, a mother, safety, joy. He doesn't go to bed wondering if he's wanted." Now she looked straight at Elliot. "He knows he is." A room silenced by truth. No one moved. No one dared to. Even the Rowe lawyers didn't speak. Elliot stared down at his notes, but his hands had curled into fists. His jaw tightened. His eyes burned, because he realized she had raised a boy he never knew, and done it with nothing but love. And maybe he was the one who had failed. Court recessed for lunch. The reporters flooded out. The lawyers gathered in tight huddles. But Judge Elliot Rowe didn't move. He sat motionless at the bench, staring at the empty witness chair where Isla had just broken open her heart for everyone to hear, and for him to feel. He stood slowly. "Ms. Rivera," he called, voice tight. Isla turned halfway to the exit. "Would you step into chambers, alone?" Her lawyer began to object, but Isla raised her hand and nodded. She followed him. Behind closed doors. The moment the heavy wooden door shut, Isla stood frozen, arms crossed over her chest like a shield. Elliot paced once, then stopped. Silence. She finally spoke. "Is this about the case?" He shook his head once. "No." More silence. Then, "Is he mine?" His voice cracked mid-sentence. The truth, unburied. Isla looked down. Her hands trembled at her sides. She wanted to scream, to cry, to run, anything but this. But she had carried this truth for nearly 9 years. She nodded slowly. "Yes." Elliot staggered a step back, like the words had knocked the breath from his chest. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her eyes flared. "You left?" "I didn't know." "You didn't try." He swallowed hard. No defense came. 2 wounds, 1 room. She stepped closer now, not out of anger, but exhaustion. "I didn't tell you because I was scared." "Scared your family would take him. Scared he'd become a pawn. Scared you'd sign him away the way you let them push me out." Elliot stared at the wall, then at her. "They lied to me. They told me you were paid off to leave." Her eyes filled with rage and heartbreak. "I would have starved before taking their money." A beat passed. Then Isla whispered, "I just wanted to raise our son in peace." The shift. Elliot looked at her then, really looked. Not as a case, not as a mistake. but as the mother of his child, the woman he loved, the woman he never stopped loving. He didn't reach for her. He didn't beg. He just said, "Can I meet him?" Her breath caught. For the first time since she walked into his courtroom, she saw not the judge, but the father. They sat on opposite sides of a quiet conference room. No judge's bench, no witness stand. Just two old souls, bruised by time, separated by silence, finally talking without titles. Elliot's hands were clasped tightly in front of him. His voice was soft now, stripped of courtroom command. "Tell me everything, Isla, please, about him, about what happened after you left." She looked down, then out the window. Rain traced thin lines down the glass. "After you disappeared, I waited," she said. "I kept thinking you'd come back, that you'd explain, that you'd fight for me." Her voice cracked. "But you didn't." The day everything changed. "I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks later," she said. "At first I thought I couldn't do it. I had no family, no job, no plan. Just a heartbeat growing inside me." Elliot's head dropped. His chest rose and fell slowly. "I worked nights at a diner until my feet swelled. Took free prenatal classes. Delivered him alone, without a name on the birth certificate." She looked at him then, not with anger, but with all the quiet pain she'd carried for 9 long years. "I didn't tell you, because I was trying to protect him. Not from you, but from everything that came with you." Elliot's guilt. Elliot stood pacing now, eyes glossy. "They told me you left, that you took money to disappear. I was a coward. I believed them. I was too afraid to dig deeper." He turned to her. "I would have come, Isla. I swear I would have. I would have raised him with you." She blinked hard. "But you didn't." A long pause. "I know," he whispered, "and I'll never forgive myself for that." The unspoken fear. Then she said what she had never dared admit. "Every time Leo asks why he doesn't have a dad, I tell him not everyone stays. And I see the way he looks at other kids with their fathers. And I wonder if I made the wrong choice." She stared at Elliot. "But I was terrified that if I let your family near him, I'd lose him forever." The moment that changes everything. Elliot stepped forward slowly. "You were never the one who ran, Isla." "I was." He placed a folded photo on the table. It was Leo's school picture. "He looks like me. But everything else, that strength, that light, that's you." For a moment, Isla couldn't breathe, and Elliot said the words she needed, but feared to hear. "I want to know him, not as a roe, not as a judge, just as his father." She stared at him for a long, still moment, then finally whispered, "Then start by showing up." Not here, but in his life. Elliot stood in his penthouse that night, staring at the framed family portrait on the wall. His parents, perfect posture, cold smiles. He remembered the day they took that picture, just days after they forced Isla out of his life. And he had stood there, dressed in his father's expectations, too afraid to speak. "But I'm not that boy anymore," he said aloud to no one. He picked up the phone. "Dad, I need to talk. About Isla, about the custody case." There was a pause. Then his father's voice, measured, cold. "We did what we had to do. You had a future to protect." Elliot's chest tightened. "You took my son from me," he said. "You didn't just ruin love. You erased blood." His mother cut in softly. "She was going to ruin you. That girl didn't belong. She raised him." Elliot snapped. "Alone, with nothing. And you knew," he whispered. "You knew the whole time." His father didn't deny it. Just silence. That was enough. Walking out on power. That night, Elliot sat in his home office, surrounded by plaques, law journals, and degrees that no longer meant what they used to. He thought of Leo's face, his quiet smile, the way Isla described his drawings, his laugh, his questions. He realized he had spent years becoming someone powerful, but not someone present. A decision was made. He opened his laptop, typed an email to the court registrar, effective immediately. "I'm recusing myself from case bar 1849. See, I can no longer preside over a case that holds the heart. I lost, and the child I didn't know I had." He hit send, then stood up. And for the first time in a decade, he wasn't acting like a roe. He was acting like a father. The courtroom looked the same the next day, but everything inside it had changed. Judge Elliot Rowe's seat was empty. A new judge, neutral and unfamiliar, now presided. The bailiff called the case. Rivera versus Rowe family estate. Custody hearing resumes. Hila sat still, hands clenched tightly in her lap. She didn't know Elliot had recused himself. She didn't know what that meant, but when she looked to the front and saw a stranger in the judge's chair, her breath caught. The new judge speaks. The new judge opened the session. Before we proceed, this court has received a formal statement from Judge Elliot Rowe regarding a personal conflict of interest. He has also submitted a character affidavit in defense of the mother, Ms. Isla Rivera. Gasps echoed. Even the Rowe legal team looked stunned. The affidavit details that Judge Rowe has personal knowledge of the plaintiff's integrity, strength and role as sole caretaker of the minor child for the past 9 years. Isla's vision blurred. He hadn't just stepped down, he'd stepped up. Isla's lawyer rises. Your Honor, based on the updated affidavit and the withdrawal of Rowe family petitioners from active pursuit, we ask for immediate ruling in favor of the mother. The Rowes whispered angrily behind their counsel, but the judge raised a hand. Ms. Rivera, do you have anything you'd like to say? She stood, voice low but clear. I just want to go home with my son. I don't need money. I don't want revenge. I only want what I've always had. The right to love him, raise him, and keep him safe. The verdict. The judge nodded solemnly. Then that's exactly what you'll have. Full legal custody of Leo Rivera is awarded to his mother, Isla Rivera. Applause broke out, quiet at first, then stronger. Hila sat down, shaking. She covered her mouth with one hand as tears rolled down. And across the street, Elliot stood on the courthouse steps, watching from a distance. He hadn't gone inside. He didn't want credit. He didn't want recognition. He just wanted her and their son to be free. When he saw the doors open and Isla walk out clutching the court papers to her chest, she looked up, saw him. They didn't say a word, but she nodded just once. And he knew he'd finally done something right. The last court date arrived like the end of a long storm. There were no cameras outside this time, no reporters waiting to twist her tears into headlines. Just a few quiet people in the gallery and a new judge with kind eyes. Hila sat straighter now, not out of fear, but strength. She wasn't here to beg. She was here to close a chapter. The judge reads the final statement. The Rowe family has withdrawn all further custody claims. The court recognizes Ms. Isla Rivera as the sole legal guardian of Leo Rivera and finds no reason to delay the ruling further. He turned to her. Congratulations, Ms. Rivera. You're free to live your life without fear of it being taken again. Tears that felt different. Isla didn't cry because she was sad. She cried because the war was finally over. No more sleepless nights worrying if someone would come knocking. No more courtrooms. No more battles. She looked at the clock on the wall. In exactly 17 minutes, Leo would get out of school. She smiled. One more voice in the gallery. Before the judge adjourned, a voice rose quietly from the back. Your Honor, may I speak? All heads turned. Elliot, dressed in a plain blue shirt. No robe, no tie, just a man. The judge nodded once. Elliot stepped forward. I'm not here to ask for anything, he said. Only to thank the woman who raised my son with more love than I ever deserved to witness. He turned to Isla. You gave him a name, a home, a life. And from this day forward, if you'll allow it, I'd like to give him something too. A father who's finally ready to show up. The courtroom fell silent. The judge gave a slow nod, then banged the gavel. Court is adjourned. After the gavel fell, Hila stood still, court papers in hand. Elliot approached slowly. You did it, he said softly. We did, she replied. He smiled, something real, something earned. And in that quiet, empty courtroom, they stood not as enemies, not as strangers, but as parents, ready to build something better. The sun had already dipped behind the rooftops as Eli stood in the small park near their apartment. Leo hung from the monkey bars, his laughter echoing in the warm air. His sketchbook lay open on the bench. Today's drawing was of a rocket ship with a family inside. A mother, a boy, and someone else, drawn faintly. She hadn't told him yet, not fully. Then he arrived. Elliot walked up slowly, no suit, no tie, just a man holding a paper bag with 2 juice boxes and a quiet heart. Isla met him with a small nod. "You're late," she said with a faint smile. "I was nervous," he admitted. She took a breath. "You still can leave." He looked at her. "Not this time." A first encounter. Leo glanced over and furrowed his brow. "Mom, who's that?" Isla gently placed a hand on his back. "That's someone special I want you to meet." Leo approached with curiosity, still clutching a crayon. Elliot knelt down. Their eyes met, blue into blue. He didn't say, "I'm your father." He didn't need to. He just held out the juice box. "Hi, Leo, I heard you like orange. Mind if I join you?" Leo looked at his mom. She nodded. And then the boy smiled. "Only if you let me win at tag." Elliot grinned. "Deal!" The whisper. As Leo ran off ahead, Isla stood beside Elliot, her arms folded softly. "He's never had a man kneel for him before." Elliot looked at her. "Then I'll do it every day until he never doubts he matters." She swallowed hard. "Why are you really here?" He turned, eyes damp with something unspoken. "Because I don't want to spend the rest of my life watching from the gallery." Then he whispered what she hadn't expected to hear again. "I loved you then, Isla." "I never stopped." She didn't respond, not with words, but she didn't walk away either. And maybe that was enough for now. It was a Sunday morning, almost a year later. The sun spilled gently through the windows of Isla's modest apartment, now a little brighter, a little fuller. The paint had been freshened. Leo's drawings now hung framed on the hallway wall. And beside the breakfast table, where Isla once sat alone, Elliot poured orange juice. A new routine. Leo buzzed around the living room in pajamas, building a Lego rocket. "Don't forget the launch is at 9 sharp, he called out. Isla laughed, flipping pancakes. Elliot looked at her, quietly amazed. They still lived simply. No mansions, no luxury. But there was peace, real peace. And more than that, there was family. A conversation they owed each other. Later that day, as Leo napped with a comic book on his chest, Isla and Elliot sat on the back step. The breeze was soft. Her hair brushed her cheek. He reached out and gently tucked it behind her ear, just like he used to. "Do you ever think," she whispered, "what our life would have been if they hadn't pulled us apart?" He nodded. "All the time." Then she looked up. "But maybe we had to lose everything, to learn how to fight for it when it really mattered." He took her hand. "I don't want to be your judge anymore, Isla. I want to be your witness." She blinked, stunned by the words. "I want to see every part of your life, from beside you. Not behind you, not across a courtroom. Just beside you." The second trial. He didn't kneel. There was no ring. Just honesty. "This is my second chance. At being a father, a man, maybe even a partner. But only if you still believe in us." She looked into his eyes. The man who once walked away wasn't standing there anymore. This was someone new, someone who stayed. And her verdict? He leaned forward, kissed his cheek and whispered, "Let's build something no one can take from us this time." 1 year later, a photo sits on Ila's new office desk. Leo in a suit, beaming. Elliot beside him, hand on his shoulder. And Isla, standing in the middle, smiling like peace finally came home. The courtroom once divided them, but love gave them a second trial. And this time, they all won.